Left of the box. Yeah, so when the fires in Jasper were happening, I was trying my best to tweet out my videos to those accounts, being like, I hate to say I told you so, but I knew this was going to happen. It's not a told you so, it's more, I knew this was going to happen, and I wish more people were aware as to the reasons why this is happening. And the fire in Jasper is an interesting case because it has three layers to it: municipal, provincial, and federal. Because Jasper is a municipality within a federal park. But the firefighting, the wildfires, that's a provincial responsibility. And so it was all three kind of going against each other. And Danielle Smith crying about it almost literally, saying, well, where were the feds? And it's like, well, the thing is that in order for the feds to come in and help, the province has to request it first, which Danielle Smith didn't do until it was far, far too late. So let's get into a little bit of what happened in Jasper, and just part of the reason why I'm so scared about what's happening this wildfire season, because I feel like the worst hasn't happened yet, and it's horrifying to think of. Because again, we've had larger communities have to be evacuated. I think the largest in Canada that had to be evacuated was 30,000 people, and they're in remote areas with usually only one road that leads out. What happens when one of these wildfires hit a far more populated center? It's only a matter of time. And to me, that's horrifying because the people in Jasper had 5-hour warning to get out of there. That's it. Like, look around your own place and think to yourself, in 5 hours, what could you possibly get together? Throw in your car to keep safe in case your place burns down. Like, what are the things that can't be replaced that you need to take with you? And where are you going to go? Yeah. It's wildfires scare me. They just, the idea of it scares me. But let's get a little bit into it. So here is a press progress article from a year ago saying Alberta's UCP government has cut tens of millions of dollars from wildfire preparedness programs. In Ontario this year, Doug Ford is spending $300 million less on wildfire preparedness than previous years. Mm. And so, speaking as wildfires rage across Alberta, United Conservative Party leader Danielle Smith promised this week that the province would be more nimble in response to emergencies after a year of cuts in wildfire programs. I covered a bit of this in my previous video. I'll try to remember to pin that below too. But you can go through it just if you type wildfires, I believe, in the search option under my videos, why don't I do that for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about? Okay, yeah, I've covered this a bunch of times. So this one was from 3 years ago from BC. This one here saying John Horgan extreme fail with extreme weather and everything else. But here's the one Ontario from just 3 months ago. The cutbacks will cost lives, talking about Ontario cutting back the wildfire and the 5-alarm fire season. The government needs to prepare for firestorms. And that one I talked about what was happening in Alberta and the cutbacks that were happening there. So you can go to these. And this one I covered again 3 years ago, but I talked a lot about it and I touched on some of these other ones. One of the intersections when it comes to these natural disasters is people who live with disabilities are at the most risk. When it comes to natural disasters like this, if you can't run, you won't make it in a lot of instances. And in BC, when it hit Lytton, I think the town was, there were a couple people who didn't make it out because they couldn't run. And so when you live with disabilities, like just imagine if you rely on a wheelchair, if you use a cane, and you have to suddenly get out of an area, how are you going to do that? Especially if you have to maybe run over terrain or something of that sort. And so I always encourage people, if you live in an area where you're at risk, even a mild risk of wildfires, make a plan. Include the people around you who live with disabilities. Maybe people who are blind, are deaf, use mobility devices, all of that sort of stuff. If you know anyone in your immediate surroundings that live with disabilities, when you make your plans, include them. So this is from Danielle Smith herself, saying, I am heartbroken to see reports that wildfires had entered the town site of Jasper. The safety of everyone is our #1 priority, and thankfully the town was evacuated earlier this week. I want to thank all of our firefighters and crews who have been hard at work fighting this fire all day and night. The town of Jasper and Jasper National Park have all hands on deck. Alberta wildfires on the ground supporting them. Our government will have more to say about this, but in the meantime, please keep Jasper in your thoughts and in your prayers. And she has a statement. Let's see if it's anything different than what I just read.
Hey everyone, like you, I'm watching the tragedy unfold in Jasper. And my thoughts are with the people who have evacuated and are watching this as well. And also those who are still in the community. Make sure if you can leave, please leave safely. Take care of yourself. Also to the emergency responders and firefighters, we wish you all the luck in fighting this fire and keeping safe as well. I've been in constant contact over the last couple of days, not only with my team, but also reaching out to our federal counterparts.
It's just her saying, in our thoughts and prayers. It's not like she could have done anything ahead of time to, help prevent this. Maybe not cut the budget. Like, that's the thing that frustrates me too so much about these conservatives, is that here they are talking about the wildfires and how heartbreaking it is, and yet they're the biggest climate change deniers out there. I'll touch on it in a little bit, but there's definitely been an increase in wildfires. Wildfires have always been an issue, but there's been an increase, and that's because of climate change. And yet these conservatives will deny that's the issue. And instead, she blames it on the feds for not supporting her sooner. And here's Doug Ford, along with the people of Ontario. I'm devastated to see the terrible impacts of the wildfires in Jasper. Ontario stands with our friends in Alberta, and we are sending anyone and anything we can to help, including firefighter crews, helicopters, and the equipment we can spare. Ontario will be there with Alberta as you rebuild. So when this happens to an Ontario town, what Danielle can do is just copy and paste this into her own tweet and just switch out the words Ontario and Alberta. Just switch those around, and she can copy and paste this and send this out, because it's only a matter of time before something like this happens in Ontario as well. In remote Indigenous communities in particular, they've had to be evacuated before. And the problem with that too is sometimes they have to be flown out. Like, little planes have to go in and fly them out, because there is no way for them to escape other than that. Here's Doug Ford just saying that he's devastated about this. And meanwhile, $300 million less on wildfire prevention in this province. His cutbacks will cost lives. So this is from the Weather Network. Startling video shows first moments of the South Jasper wildfire. How loud is this?
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. That's crazy. It was a really, really bright lightning strike. So.
The first moments of a wildfire that within hours.
The majority of wildfires are caused by lightning strikes. And with the way everything has been dried out, with, lack of rain and stuff, so we get these heavy rains every now and then. But that's not good enough for the environment, because it doesn't absorb into the ground. You can see tests and studies that show damp ground absorbs water far better than like rock hard dry ground. And so when it's hard, dry ground, it just runs off into the creeks and rivers and doesn't really do its job to, keep things a little bit moistened. So you have these forests that are just so brittle that a lightning strike and it's just tinder and it just goes up. Like nothing is stopping it. And when these lightning strikes happen in remote areas, who's going to see it before it gets out of control? So this one is just kind of amazing that they caught the footage of it right as it was beginning.
Would shut down Jasper National Park and eventually destroy 30% of the town of Jasper. That's what these images appear to show, time-stamped to just after 7 p.m. July 22nd and geotagged to about 27 kilometers south of the Jasper town site.
This road is going to be closed in the next hour.
These videos were taken by Delia Moe and Enoch Leisure, a pair of American travelers who were driving south down Highway 93 on their way home from a trip to Alaska. As they explained, they saw a flash of lightning hit the ground ahead of them, and about 5 minutes later, they came upon a rapidly growing blaze. They notified Parks Canada and left the area south at full speed.
The rain started coming down, he had the windshield wipers going, and all of a sudden we see like a bright flash of lightning. And then we kept driving, and all of a sudden we see smoke billowing from the left-hand side. And as we got closer, that's where we saw the flames.
The storm front hit kind of that same point, and that wind was going at least 50 miles an hour.
The encounter paints a vivid picture of the Jasper wildfire's ferocious origins. A lightning strike turned roaring inferno within moments.
I felt the heat from the fire like on the window.
By 8 p.m., Parks Canada had assessed the blaze and declared an evacuation alert. By 10 p.m., that was an evacuation order. 2 days later, the flames reached the town site. Safely home now in Nebraska, but still shaken by the experience, the couple offered words of support to all impacted by the disaster.
I know the recovery is going to be very hard, but, I'm sure the community, the country is all going to be behind them. It's going to help them, support them, and get them back on their feet.
Canadians watched in horror as the iconic town of Jasper burned in July 2024.
So this is another video that just automatically played, but I do want to touch on it given the title.
But in the nearby national park, a grizzly bear was also busy trying to navigate the fire and find safety for herself and her 2 cubs.
This is actually the first I've heard of where you were actually observing where a large animal went while a fire burned through an area.
Tagged with a tracking device on her collar, officials from Parks Canada said the mama, known as Bear 222, found a cool, damp spot close to the Athabasca River where she and her young ones waited patiently. Parks Canada had been keeping tabs on her since the fire began and later posted on social media that she looks like a very healthy grizzly bear. Including the photos in the thread, the government agency added she has been eating a mix of berries and clover on the edge of the Jasper Park Lodge golf course.
This would be typical behavior to sense that the fire is coming and to find a safe place to weather it out.
Wildlife experts note that most animals are adept at fending for themselves during a wildfire, with a few exceptions.
We have smaller animals or slower, like something like a porcupine that can't move very fast, typically is in trees, and they may suffer from this.
Despite the heartbreaking situation endured by those who lost everything in Jasper, the internet found some hope in the resilience of this local family of grizzly bears.
And I think the main tragedy here is the town site and the people that live there. But in terms of the wilderness areas, they're going to just go through their natural process and be just fine.
Yeah, so I wanted to show that one as well, because often what many people don't realize is how much wildlife is destroyed by these fires. Like, especially if you go into sensitive habitats and stuff of that sort. You showed pictures of like raccoons and stuff. So animals that live in trees, they go and escape into trees when they feel they're in danger. So that's not great. But I remember seeing stories from the wildfires in Australia and the koalas, and some of the koalas that, were burned and had to be put into treatment and stuff. But so many didn't make it. I remember a story, and this isn't an exaggeration, that one wildfire season was so severe, they lost 1 billion wildlife creatures. Some species can go extinct in a single wildfire, depending on where it is. And their habitat's gone, their home is gone. So even if they survive, all the things that they need to survive, their shelter, their food sources, their water sources might be gone. And so it's not enough to just simply survive the fire. You also have to recover from it. And with humans too, that is difficult because, if your home, if your business gets burned down to the ground, and I talk about this in the other videos, not all insurance companies will cover that. And so it's the people who often can't afford the more, full insurances that end up losing everything and having to start over from scratch. So we just have some footage here of the fire as it was happening. Just wild how much that smoke billows. And this is from Lindsay Werner saying, brace yourself. This is a tough image to see. Jasper, what is that, Malang Lodge or something like that? Same eyewitnesses says Petrocan bright spot were hit. This was over half an hour ago. Please note I did not take the photo and was personally sent it under the guise of photo capture once, and the person who took the photo wants an anonymity. And so historical landmarks go away in these sorts of fires as well. Again, devastation. People losing everything. Their pictures, family albums, heirlooms, memories, toys, and stuff from childhood. A lot of people lose pets because sometimes they're not able to evacuate with their pets. It's devastating. Like, I have 3 pet taxis right now, and that's for each of my cats. But I can't imagine what it would even do to them trying to evacuate them. The stress that would put them under would be horrific. And where do I go? Like, where do I go with 3 cats if I have to leave the city suddenly? Because it's not just a matter of leaving with the 3 cats, but it's like going to a place that is then set up to look after those 3 cats with the food and everything that they need. Just more pictures of the devastation that happened. Because not everyone will get these warnings on time. Not everyone is plugged into their phone 24/7. If you don't have the radio on, if you're taking an afternoon nap, that could be the difference between life and death when it comes to the amount of time you have to get out of these situations. Which is why it's very important you have a plan, because wildfires travel at astonishingly fast speeds, especially if there's a wind or something, and they actually create their own weather systems because the way the heat interacts with the surrounding air and the way it causes drafts into it. So they'll cause their own weather systems, which will then just help spread it even further and faster. So you might only get a couple hours warning. So if there's, always, if you're in an area where it might be a problem, always make sure you have like your 48-hour bag available, where it's like something for 48 hours you can survive in your car pretty much. So you have medications, water, things of that sort for 48 hours that you can take with you. But yeah, just make a plan. And include neighbors and people around you, who live with disabilities. So here we have Alberta Premier fights tears in emotional update about Jasper wildfires. Ooh, let's watch.
Good morning, everyone. In the last day or so, we have all seen on the news and social media the horrific pictures and videos coming out of Jasper. Homes and businesses have been lost to a wildfire that people are calling a wall of flames. There is no denying that this is the worst nightmare for any community. To the residents of Jasper and those displaced far from home looking at the images of your town on TV and online, the feelings of loss and fear and loneliness must be overwhelming. But you are not alone. All Albertans are with you. For many generations, the town of Jasper and the parks surrounding it have been a source of pride. With some of the most beautiful scenery in the entire, in the world. Our grand
Sorry, it looks like she's trying to be emotional, but can't quite make it, you know? Was like, yeah, I can just concentrate a little bit more. I can make these tears happen. That doesn't seem real at all. Like, just, she should be ashamed of herself. To stand up there and pretend to cry, pretend to care, when she's responsible for the cutbacks that exacerbated this situation. You know, I'm pretty sure she denies climate. I know she denied COVID a fair bit, and people died because of that. They don't care. They don't care at all. The only reason why she would care is if it hurt the industry, and Jasper is known as a tourist destination. That's the only reason why she would care.
parents visited to experience the majesty of this place with its mountains and lakes and meadows. They took our parents, who then took us to this special spot that they'd spent time in as children. And now we take our own kids and our own loved ones and visitors from around the world to feel that same feeling that you get with your first glimpse of the mountains on the horizon.
Only
A
something
feeling
could
that
have been done.
even though you've just left home, you're coming home. And so although those of us who experience Jasper as visitors can't imagine what it feels like to be a Jasperite right now, we share the sense of loss with all of those who live in the town, who care for it, and who have helped build it. Jasper, we will continue to stand by you, and as everyone works to get their feet back under them, and as we look forward to recovery. Right now, the wildfire is still out of control, and crews are working in dangerous conditions to try and protect critical infrastructure.
So this is from The Breakdown on Twitter. Fantastic account to follow if you want to stay up to date with politics, Albertan politics in particular. And so here they're saying Danielle Smith, who only moments earlier was overcome with emotion at the tragedy unfolding in Jasper, was asked about the delay in emergency payments. Her response? In effect, they can wait a bit. That's what private insurance is for. Because feelings.
After the 2016 wildfire in Fort McMurray, Alberta announced evacuees would get emergency financial relief 2 days after the evacuation.
And I have family who lives in northern Alberta, and they're talking, just mentioned the Fort McMurray fire. An entire town needed to be evacuated, and a large part of that town was destroyed. I've had family members who have had to flee their homes from those areas, way up in northern Alberta. And some of these communities, again, they're so remote that the next nearest community can be a 2-hour drive away. So it's difficult to get to, it's difficult to have the supplies, and then these aren't necessarily big communities around. So just having the supplies and stuff necessary within those other communities, the strain it puts on them is horrendous. And you know, when you know people in particular that go through this and have had to evacuate, it hits different. And, it's going to get to the point where everyone will personally know or have had something happen to them where climate change has destroyed their lives. Either a flash flood, a storm, a wildfire, the heat waves, the snowstorms. In the not too distant future, everyone will know someone who's been uprooted, lost their house, lost their business, had to flee their home. We'll all know at least one person or be that person ourselves.
Jasper has seen similar destruction to Fort McMurray. Actually, if we're talking percentage-wise, Jasper lost a greater percentage of the town. So why not just authorize those payments now? I mean, does anyone here really believe this evacuation will last fewer than 7 days?
One of the decisions that we made in previous emergencies is that we would wait for 7 days, because there's oftentimes you can return within a shorter period of time, as has happened. We have had
Reminder, this is after that other clip that I just showed you where she was overcome with emotion and tears.
Evacuations already this fire season, which started early, and we have been able to get people back home within 7 days. There is a Treasury Board process that we have to go through in order to be able to accelerate or expedite that, and so we'll be meeting as an emergency management committee each day, gauging it. But the main thing that people need right now is to have the immediate support. So the support of the hotels, the food, the
government, maybe the support of the government with emergency payments so that they can afford these hotels and food and stuff. Maybe don't wait 7 days.
Emergency evacuation, that's part of the reason.
And I'm sorry, even with the 7 days, because she's like, oh, well, after the 7 days, because some people can come home sooner than that. I don't care if it's a day. People will need support. There's a lot of people who can't, financially handle a day's worth of work, like off work, because that's how tight people's budgets are. So even a day, having to spend a day away from work, or a day at a hotel, or a night at a hotel, is a financial strain to a lot of people, who can't wait for payments for 7 days, to be suffering for 7 days before the government finally steps in and says, oh, here's a little bit of cash to help you out.
Why we wait until 7 days, because we know that we have a lot of support that we're able to give as people are figuring out where they're going to go, find out whether they're going to be able to return home, find out whether their home is going to survive. We'll gauge it. We'll listen to feedback about how people are feeling. But we know that this is going to be, for many people, a long-term period of time that they will be out. We'll have to obviously work with their insurance companies to ensure as well that they're able to get the support payments through insurance so that they can be supported that way also. But we do want to do whatever we can to be supportive.
And they say, to be clear, wildfire response is coordinated effort, combined response from multiple different levels and jurisdictions. If one jurisdiction makes major cuts to the resources, that affects all areas. That means if one jurisdiction, say Alberta, makes major cuts to wildfire resources, that leaves other jurisdictions to scramble to build up their resources. So to blame the lack of resources should fall first on any jurisdiction that made the major cuts. It's also probably worth noting that the biggest contributing factor here, as reported, appears to be the conditions. No wildfire response can fully address that. Sorry, folks, but this is a dry climate now. And so this is from MP Herjit, just saying, I have approved requests from Alberta to provide immediate and urgent support from the federal government to protect people and homes in Jasper and communities across Alberta. The images of structures burning are distressing, and all our thoughts are with the people of Jasper. So again, they had to wait until Alberta basically asked for the federal government to step in. But the Conservatives will always blame the federal government. It will be, if they're provincial Conservatives, they'll blame the federal Liberals. If they're federal Conservatives, they'll blame the provincial Liberals. If none are currently available for them to blame, then they'll blame previous administrations. That's just what they do. They just blame other people for the messes they cause. So here we get a bit more about the increase in wildfires.
Calgary and Edmonton are in the midst of their smokiest years ever in terms of smoke hours. In Edmonton, 266 have been recorded so far this wildfire season. In Calgary, 499 smoke hours have been recorded since May 1st. That means Calgarians have spent over 16% of their time shrouded in smoke, and as wildfires continue to burn near and far, these records are only expected to rise. So what exactly is a smoke hour? Well, it's a metric tracked by Environment and Climate Change Canada, meant to keep a general record of the amount of smoke that passes through a given area from the start of May through the end of September. Smoke hours are recorded at weather stations under 24-hour observations, such as international airports, and they're defined as an hour during which ground visibility is 9.7 kilometers or less due to smoke. It's important to note smoke hours are not directly correlated to air quality, but that doesn't mean the statistic should be ignored.
We do know that increasing air pollution is associated with all sorts of bad things, including stroke, heart attack, lung cancer, etc.
Back in 2014, the city of Yellowknife saw 476 smoke hours. Dr. Courtney Howard's research shows that year, asthma-related ER visits doubled, while pneumonia-related visits increased by half. Mental health impacts were also observed.
We need to anticipate increasing costs related to adaptation, and we need to make sure that we transition to a low-carbon economy.
She says that when this wildfire season finally ends, community leaders need to identify and closely study its impacts, with human-caused climate change predicted to increase wildfire activity in the years ahead, making extreme summers like this one more frequent.
It's really, really time for us to actually crunch the numbers and do what's right for public health.
They're increasing. There's just no way around it. That's what's happening. And it's only going to get worse from here on out unless the governments really step up what they're doing. So here's, again, the layers of how destructive, like, it's a cascading effect with natural disasters and climate change. So wildfires devastated Jasper. The soot and ash are putting Albertans' glaciers at risk, scientists warn. So if the fire itself wasn't bad enough, ash is darkening Athabasca Glacier, causing it to absorb more solar heat, hastening glacier melt. That is one dark-looking glacier right there. That would you would almost think that's stone and not ice. As the devastating fires around Jasper National Park filled the sky with smoke and ash, John Pomeroy was thinking of his region's famous and melting glaciers. Just a week before the fires, the University of Saskatchewan hydrologists had been to the Athabasca Glacier, located about 100 kilometers south of the town of Jasper, to collect measurements. His team found that the glacier had already melted about 3 meters in thickness since last September, which is plenty for a mostly winter period, he said. What Pomeroy's been seeing at the glacier is not the bright white snowy landscape they're often associated with, but rather a grimy and darkened surface. He believes it's likely that the glacier has been further darkened by the ash and soot from the latest fires. And the grime doesn't just look bad. According to Pomeroy, the glacier is melting faster because darker surfaces absorb more solar radiation than a clear white surface would. And the combination of that, along with hot temperatures, puts a glacier into a death spiral. According to measurements collected by Pomeroy's team, the Athabasca Glacier melted nearly 9 meters last year, a record for the glacier that had been visited by millions of people and is an iconic stop on Alberta's scenic Icefields Parkway. Pomeroy is worried that in addition to the summer's soaring temperature, all the extra soot from the recent wildfires could result in record melt being surpassed. It puts these glaciers in a very perilous position yet again, he said. Meltwater from the thinning glaciers feeds the Athabasca River, which runs more than 1,000 kilometers through Alberta and Saskatchewan. The Wapta River, a tributary to the Athabasca River that runs just below the glacier, has been abnormally high flow since early July, which Pomeroy says indicates a faster than normal melt. Researchers say melting glaciers in Western Canada could disrupt the flow of glacier-fed rivers, impacting water supply and hydroelectric power generations in that region. Part of the reason why Canada has so much fresh water is from these glaciers and these mountains and them running, finding ways to flow out to the ocean, and it provides a lot of fresh water. When those glaciers go away, this continent will dry up. We get a lot of our fresh water from winter. The winter snow lands, it melts, it goes into the ground. We get that lovely groundwater and fills the rivers and the lakes and stuff. We haven't been getting nearly as much snow as we used to. Like, most of Canada is landlocked. If you're in the middle of nowhere, this is putting, people at high risk of going without water, of entire forests just drying out, because the areas that used to supply the water, they're not going to be there forever unless, suddenly we magically get big winters back and the glaciers can grow back to some level.